Hi everyone, I am back today showcasing the rest of the cards that I created using those alcohol inked backgrounds that I showed in part 1. If you haven't seen that video, you might want to watch that first, otherwise you're not going to see how I created the really pretty backgrounds for these cards. But the dies that I'm going to be using are these right here. They're all butterfly dies from our latest collection, and they are really pretty. So I'm taking an alcohol inked background and I'm going to be die cutting a stitch rectangle along with 2 circles from the top center of the card panel. And I did mention that this paper is not the greatest when it comes to die cutting. So as you can see, it only cut portions of the die, and then I'm just going to use my scissors to snip off whatever didn't fully cut through. Yupo paper is also not the greatest when it comes to die cutting because both Yupo and this Pixis alcohol ink paper from Amazon are synthetic papers. But with the help of the scissors, you can get a pretty perfect die cut. So originally I just wanted the one circle frame and then the smaller circle on the inside, but I decided to create one more frame by adding a smaller circle inside the circle I already die cut, and then I will be left with 2 circle frames and then 1 solid circle. I'm going to glue the rectangle panel onto a black mat. And then I'm going to add 1 layer of foam tape to my largest circle ring. I am just using my Scotch 3M foam tape, and if you remove the backing, you can manipulate the foam tape and turn it around the circle. So I went ahead and adhered that to the center of the panel. And for the slightly smaller circle ring, I'm going to add 2 layers of foam tape. And it was after I added the foam tape that I realized I wanted acetate to create a window. So luckily I was able to pull off the double layer of foam tape and still have it keep its shape, so I can re-add it after I add my acetate behind the frame. So here I'm doing that. Because this paper is really slick, it didn't stick super well, and I was able to do that. With any other paper, I'm not sure if I would have been able to do that, but I'm glad that it worked because you guys know I love my acetate. I don't know how I forgot it, but you can see that I use all of my acetate. I keep every little scrap, and I actually don't use acetate. These are overhead sheets that teachers use back in the day. I don't even know if they still use these, but they're a little bit thinner than acetate, but they get the job done. They're perfect for shaker cards and for window cards. So I went ahead and re-added that foam tape ring. Again, I manipulated it back into the perfect circle. I glued the center solid circle down to the black panel completely flat, and then over that I added my smallest ring. So I really enjoy the dimension on this card and that everything lines up with that wispy alcohol ink background. Now I didn't line it up perfectly, the rings are a little bit offset, but I think it still looks really nice. I popped up my pink foil sentiment to the bottom of this card panel, and I do show how I make these little foiled sentiments in part 1. If you want to see how that is done, I use my Gemini hot foil press for them. And then I added a black outline butterfly to the center, and I'm just going to embellish this card with a couple gold Trinity stamp sequins. And I love that the gold on the sequins is almost the same color gold as the foiling on the alcohol inked background. So I just added that to my A2 card base, and that is going to complete card 4. I did show 3 other cards in part 1 if you want to see how those turned out. But for card 5, I'm going to take this Scrappy Tails slimline brick background die and cut it from some black cardstock. The size of this is 3.5 by 8.5. Now you guys know that the alcohol paper that I bought from Amazon is cut to an A7 card panel, so it's 5 by 7 inches. Therefore, it does not work for slimline cards, but you're going to see that I was able to make my alcohol inked background slightly longer by adding this brick die cut on top. So I'm adding a bunch of glue behind this background die. You can see I already have my alcohol inked background cut down to 3.5 by 8.5 inches. And I'm going to take a scrap from that panel and just add it to the bottom. So here you can see that that panel is cut to 3.5 by 1.5, and the lines on the brick is going to cover where those two background pieces meet, so it looks like one continuous panel. I was really happy that I was able to make these beautiful backgrounds into a slimline card panel, and the brick really makes the colors in the background pop, I feel. So I'm going to take a couple of my black outline butterflies. The shadow layers for these are some more alcohol inked die cuts. Again, I showed that in part 1. But I tried to find colors that coordinated with the background. So I actually used the pink butterflies I cut from a card I created in part 1. So it's kind of like a 2-for-1 card here. And I like to pop my butterfly wings up, so I'm just going to add glue to the centers of each butterfly. The happy birthday sentiment at the bottom is foiled with gold, and that is a Spellbinders die. I will have everything that I used linked below. I'm going to pop up each of these butterflies along with the sentiment to add some dimension. Here I'm using my U-line foam tape behind each of these images, but if I had more time and if I wasn't making 8 cards in one day, I probably would have die cut the shadow layers for the butterflies a couple times, as well as this happy birthday sentiment, and layered it up, you know, like 2 or 3 layers of heavyweight cardstock behind. That way it's completely even. But foam tape does work. You just have to be pretty generous with your foam tape for it to go in the mail without it being crushed. So I really love the black outlined butterflies. I can't choose between the white or the black because the white looks really nice with softer, cooler colors, and the black looks amazing with bright, warm colors. So let me know what you guys prefer, if you like the black outline butterfly cards better or the white. So you guys know when I do these type of backgrounds, I like to inlay some of the pieces back in. I just like that look. So I have a couple of the black bricks that cut from this outline panel. I'm going to just add a couple back inside. This kind of acts as a embellishment. In fact, I add some gold embellishments that I regret now looking at the card. I think it may have been a little bit too much, but I think it's still a really pretty card. I am in love with these colors. And the gold does tie in with the gold foiling on the sentiment. And then I'm just going to attach this to my slimline card base, which is going to be white. I kind of wish I did black, but it's okay. And here you can see the back of this alcohol ink background. I did not like the first attempt I did, so I flipped it to the back and created this background. And you'll see a lot of my backgrounds I flipped over and tried again, which is what's great about this paper. With Yupo, you can completely erase and keep creating as many backgrounds as you want. With this paper, you only have 2 chances, but I found that seemed to work fine for me. So for my third card, I did emboss that same brick background on white cardstock. I embossed it, I did not cut it. So I have another alcohol background here that is already pre-cut to a small size. Now, if you want to do this, I would recommend starting with a larger panel and then cutting it down, because as you can see, you can't really see that foil plate through the foil. So you're essentially taking a chance that it's not going to line up perfectly, and that is what happened with this panel. So here I'm showing you that the foil plate was completely crooked. If you're wondering, this is the same circle frame foil plate that I used in part 1. I really love how dainty it looks, but it is completely unstraight. Luckily, the elements I add to this panel are pretty much cover a lot of this, so I didn't worry too much about it. I'm gonna go ahead and pop up my With Sympathy die cut, and this is like the only sympathy card I've made this year, and I thought that this was a nice design with the gold and the white and the green. It's not too colorful, in your face. I think it's really elegant. So what I like specifically about these sitting butterflies is that they're perfect to sit on top of large sentiments or word dies. So I'm going to add both of the butterflies from the sitting butterfly set to this card, and I cut the outlines from white and the shadow layers are cut from gold mirror cardstock. I gold foiled the With Sympathy sentiment, which is another Spellbinders foil plate. I'm going to glue the embossed brick background over to the left side of the card panel. Now that's a slimline, so it's not going to cover the A2 completely, but I was fine with that because this smaller panel is going to go over to the right. I'm going to pop it up with foam tape and attach that to the right side of my card base, and that is going to complete this card. I'm going to add a couple gold sequins, and that's it. I think this is one of my favorite cards. I think it's really simplistic, but a really nice With Sympathy card design, which are always really hard for me to come up with. So I might go back and create a couple more of these because I do have 2 more backgrounds of alcohol ink left over. And With Sympathy cards are the hardest to make, so having them already in your stash is nice. So yeah, that is going to complete card number 6, I believe. Here is a close-up. Moving on, I'm going to use my favorite alcohol ink background that I created. I just love the purple and pink combo here. I'm going to end up using a white outline butterfly, a silver circle frame, and a couple of these flowers that I cut from the Layering Daisies die set by Scrappy Tails Crafts. Here's what the die set looks like, and I cut those flowers from an alcohol ink background. And they're purple and pink, so they match the background really nicely, and the centers I cut from that silver foil cardstock. So I have this circle frame again. I'm using the largest size for all of these cards, I forgot to mention. I'm going to foil it with some silver foil this time, and I'm going to try to line this up straight. If you want to completely avoid messing up a card panel, you can attach the foil plate, the foil, and the card panel together with washi tape. That's going to ensure that everything's going to be perfectly straight. But I don't know why I didn't do that for these backgrounds, especially because, you know, these backgrounds are one of a kind. You wouldn't want to mess them up. But I got lucky for the majority of these cards. So this one turned out really nice. I know it's really hard to see that foiling, but in real life it catches the light so beautifully. And on all these cards, that little circle detail is my favorite aspect of each card. So here are my Layering Daisies. I want to kind of create a wreath around the silver circle frame. Originally, I thought about adding an alcohol ink shadow layer for my butterfly, but ended up going with a silver foil layer instead. And I am now attaching my flowers to this circle frame, and it's a little bit difficult because both the silver and the alcohol paper are slick. So they do slide around quite a bit. I'm going to attach my white butterfly to the silver shadow layer, and I must say that I love that these dies include the shadow layer. Not only is it nice and quick to put these butterflies together, but you also have that ability to pop up the outline wings, which I can't do with the majority of the butterflies I have in my stash. So I just love these butterflies. I know I said it a lot in part 1, but I wanted to really create some elegant cards with these, and I thought that the alcohol backgrounds were perfect for these butterflies. So I'm adding the silver mirrored centers to my daisies, and these are drawn very whimsically. They're drawn like in different angles, But you can really dress them up and make them for an elegant card like you can see here. I'm going to add another scrap of acetate behind the circle. I'm sure you guys knew I was going to do that. I'll trim off the excess, and then I'm going to add foam tape behind the circle, the butterfly, and even those teeny tiny petals behind the flowers. So I spared that process for you. So I'm just going to remove the backing on my foam tape. I'm going to glue it to the left side of this panel. I wanted to try to showcase as much of that background as possible, and the majority of that color is on the right side. I have my sentiment here I chose From Me to You. I foiled that on white cardstock with pink foil. I cut the sentiment down so that it fit better in the circle, and I just glued that flat to the panel and popped up my circle frame right on top. I really love this card design as well. It's really hard for me to pick my favorites because they're all so unique. For this card, I am using a sequin pack that has a couple purple and pink iridescent sequins, so I'll add those around the sentiment, and then I will mat this panel on black cardstock and add it to my card base. I'm not sure if you noticed, but a lot of my cards have black mats. I find that if I have a really colorful background, that black really helps to draw the eye in. So the black mat is cut to the size of an A2 card base. So it is going to cover it completely, and then that is going to complete this card. I don't know what number we're at. I always lose track on these type of videos. Also, please let me know what kind of videos you want me to make. Is there a certain product you want me to work with, a certain technique? I am definitely interested to know what you guys want to watch. But yeah, that is going to complete this card. Here is a close-up. Moving on, I'm going to take the Scrappy Tails Slimline Wood Grain background die, and I'm going to cut this from white cardstock, and I'm only going to run it through my machine once. Because this is a large background die, you do need to run it through a couple times to get those details poked out of the die, but I actually wanted it to stay in one piece. So I just ran it through once, and I'm going to tape the back of it with washi tape to make sure that none of those pieces fall out, because I want to ink blend on this panel. So I have a couple alcohol ink butterflies, and they're red, orange, and yellow, so I thought they looked kind of like monarchs. So I'm going to go with the black outline for these, and I want the background to have the same colors as the colors that are on the alcohol inked butterflies. So I'm going to be using abandoned coral and mustard seed. I did flip my panel around and added the washi tape where some of those cut areas were so that everything stayed in place. I'm going to start with abandoned coral, just using a blender brush here and going around the edges. And then I will blend that out with mustard seed, and then I will go over once again with abandoned coral and mustard seed just to get a really nice blend. I am blending on 110 pound white Nina cardstock here, and I do really like this paper for ink blending. I'm going to leave the center of this panel white. Eventually it is going to turn a very light yellow color. I was definitely aiming for a dramatic looking ink blend here. So I definitely want the edges to be quite dark and very light in the center. So here I'm going back in with those colors again, and they're going to mix and create a really pretty orange. And then you can also see that that wood grain is starting to show up even more now. So I think that did add a nice texture. You can also cut this panel and layer it onto like another similar color. So maybe like on a solid red cardstock. But I did want this to be pretty subtle. I wanted the focus to be on the butterflies. So I'm going to pull those back in. Originally I was just going to go with the 4 butterflies, I think. But off camera, I cut one more background for another butterfly to add to this card. I really wanted it to be full of monarchs. I'm also going to use that same scrap of alcohol ink paper to foil my sentiment I went with gold foil, and the sentiment says thank you. And this Spellbinders foil plate set includes the coordinating dies, so I'll just cut that out. Okay, so I'm going to bring back my card panel, and here you can see I added an extra butterfly. I'm going to have that sitting butterfly at the bottom sit on top of the sentiment. I did pop up all of these butterflies, and I did glue the center of the black outlines onto the shadow layers, so again I can pop up the butterfly wings and add some more dimension. All of these are already mounted on foam tape, so I'm just going to remove the backing and pop them up over this panel. And this one out of the 10 that I made, I feel is the most eye-catching because of these gorgeous colors. And I think they really do look like monarchs. I am also going to pop up the sentiment and my last little butterfly here. Popping up really takes a lot of time because you have to cut those really tiny pieces, but it is definitely worth it to me. I'm going to embellish this card with the same gold sequins. These are really nice. I use them quite a bit on my cards, and I like that they don't have the hole. They are completely whole, like solid. I am attaching these down with my art glitter glue. I am of course going to mat it on black cardstock that is going to cover my card panel completely. So the black mat is cut to 3 3/4 by 8 3/4. And if you're wondering, both the brick and the wood grain background die are cut to 8 1/2 by 3 1/2. And I always make my card bases 3 3/4 by 8 3/4. You could do 4 by 9, you can do 3 1/2 by 8 1/2. There's a lot of different sizes for slimline, so I always kind of go in the middle of the two most popular sizes. So yeah, that is going to complete my 9th card. I know this is my last card, so I'm going to create a pop-up vase, and I have these 2 rainbow alcohol ink panels left. I'm going to cut the 1 vase panel from each of the 2 sheets, and I do keep all of the leftover scraps for future cards because it is pretty pricey paper. I also have a whole bunch of butterflies left that I cut in part 1. I wanted to use up a bunch of them, and these are all the rainbow looking butterflies, so they match really well with the vase panel. So because this is synthetic paper, it did not create the score lines that the die provides. I mean, you can see the score lines, but it's not very strong. So I'm reinforcing them all with my scoreboard. You wouldn't have to do this with this die for normal paper, but I wanted to make sure that I had crisp edges. So I decided to do that. I am now reinforcing the score lines by folding them all down, and then I will attach these 2 panels together by adding double-sided tape to each tab on each panel, and then I will remove the double-sided tape on one panel and attach it to the other panel on the side without the tab. And then you can go ahead and just roll it together to attach both ends, and then you have your little vase. And this is actually an octagon. I'm going to go ahead and reinforce the score lines even more. This is how the card folds flat. And this Pixis alcohol ink paper is pretty heavy. It's about 100 pounds, so it actually does work well for a pop-up card base. I went ahead and cut my bridges from heavyweight white cardstock. This is included in the die set. You're going to want to cut 4 of them and add double-sided tape to each of the tabs. You can see I already kind of placed them in that triangle shape where the 2 tabs face each other and the point is facing towards me. That is good to do because that is how you actually put these inside the vase. So I'm going to slow down the video so that you can see how to add these in. I'm going to remove the double-sided tape on all of these first so that it's nice and easy to add these in pretty quickly. And I would suggest very strong tape here. I'm going to pick any point on this octagon. It really doesn't matter. So I kind of went towards the center and added it to one side of a point. I skipped the following point and glued the next tab to the exact following point. Then I'll glue my next bridge to the same score line just on the other side of it, skip the next point, and glue my tab to the following point. For my next bridge, I'm gluing one tab right up to the point I just added the last bridge to. I'll skip the next point and glue the tab to the following point. And then I will just add my final bridge, and that is going to complete this card base. Now you can start decorating it, and if you have that star shape, that means you glued it in properly and it is going to fold completely flat. So because I have butterflies, I want these to look like they're flying, so I have some acrylic sticks. These are basically like heavyweight clear plastic. You can try acetate, but the acetate that I have is very flimsy, so I'm not sure if it would work. You can also use normal cardstock for this, but because I make so many pop-up cards, and if you also create a lot of pop-up cards, I would suggest buying these clear scraps. They come in 12 by 12 sheets. I cut them down to 1/2-inch strips or 1/4-inch strips, depending on how heavy the die cut is that I'm popping up. And they just, because they're clear, you don't see them, so I really enjoy using these. I am using a glue called 3-in-1, which is super strong once it's dry, but it dries in a couple of minutes. So you're gonna see there's one butterfly in the back there, and I really wasn't a fan of the back side of these alcohol inked butterflies. You can cut it out again from black or from white to make it look cleaner, but I didn't feel like doing that. So I'm actually going to create a vase that you view just from the front as opposed to the 360 design, which is what this vase was designed for. You can definitely do that where you can face the butterflies in all different directions, and as you spin the vase, you see all of these beautiful butterflies. But because these were so kind of icky at the back, they were brown, I just kept this as a front viewed card, and because I actually plan on keeping this card and using it as decoration in my room, I figured I will, skip the whole matting additional butterflies on the back to make it look cleaner. So this vase holds a lot of butterflies. You can see I'm moving some around and taking some out, replacing some. That's what I really like about this glue, is that you have the ability to do that. And I'm placing the taller sticked butterflies to the very back of the card. And I'm gluing these sticks to those bridges. Some of these butterflies I'm gluing directly to the card base to add even more depth. But this is a really fun, unique card that's very different. It does fold completely flat, and I'll show you guys that. You want to be mindful of the height. So this is sized to fit in an A7 envelope, so you want to make sure that your butterflies do not exceed 7 inches and 5 inches across. So here you can see the back of these are not so pretty, but I'm going to display this pretty side forward. And this is just such a pretty card. I love the alcohol ink panel at the bottom, matches all of those colorful butterflies on the inside. This is by far my favorite card out of the 10, but interestingly, it was my husband's least favorite card. So in a previous video where I made 10 cards, I asked my husband to rank them from his least favorite to his favorite. So I did that with these cards here, and here is his ranking. His least favorite is the card I just made, which is absurd to me because this one's my favorite. He said that he didn't like the card panel. He didn't like that white was showing. I was like, okay, all right. We can agree to disagree, I guess. And then his 9th favorite was this one. I will say that he thought all 10 of these were really pretty. He said these were some of my best card designs. So it was difficult for him to pick. But it is interesting to get the opinion of someone who is not a crafter, who doesn't know how long I've spent on each card. His 8th pick was that brick one. And then the With Sympathy, which I was kind of surprised. I thought that one would be higher up because Anthony's more of like a simplistic kind of guy. But I think he based it off of colors. He's not a huge fan of pink and purple, so they're kind of in the middle here. This one right here is actually my second favorite, but he put that one as his fifth, and this is his fourth. He quote said that he liked the stamping and embossing on this card, which I was very impressed that he knew that terminology. And here is a pink purple one that's pretty high up on his list. This is number 3. He really loved that background, and like I said, that was my favorite background, so I wasn't surprised there. And then this is his second favorite. He said, quote, he likes that it was just the outline of the butterfly. And this is his absolute favorite because he said, quote, these are my favorite colors. So, interesting. I don't know. You guys said last time that you enjoyed knowing his opinion, so I think I'll do that for every video where I make 5 to 10 cards. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, and if you haven't yet already, please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you're notified when I post my next video. Alright guys, I will see you next time. Bye!